37-year-old Scottish national Christopher Harkins is a seasoned con man who swindled nearly $280,000 out of 9 or more female victims over a 6-year period, lasting from 2013 to 2019. In most cases, he targeted single women on dating websites while posing as a successful businessman. Once he gained the victim's trust, he began asking for loans with fake stories about being in crisis and needing money on short notice. One of the excuses Harkins used was that his bank account had been frozen despite containing ample funds, leaving him in a supposedly unexpected bind. Some victims handed over their life savings, while others borrowed money in order to provide the loans. According to authorities, once Harkins had drained each victim of her resources, or she became unwilling to fork over more cash, he moved on to his next target. Very little, if any, of the money was ever recovered, leaving the victims on their own to financially recover. In January of 2024, Harkins pleaded guilty to fraud. A jury found him guilty of additional crimes, including assaulting one woman and filming at least 2 women in intimate situations without their knowledge or consent. Altogether, he was convicted of 19 charges, landing him a 12-year prison sentence. While handing down the punishment, the judge overseeing Harkins' case emphasized the degree of planning that went into his crimes. The defendant was also admonished for taking advantage of his victims' compassion and emotions, then leaving them high and dry as they faced newfound financial struggles resulting directly from his actions. Number 14. Brian Wedgeworth. 49-year-old Brian Brainard Wedgeworth has a history of using at least 13 aliases. According to federal authority, he scammed 30 or more women across 8 states out of at least $1.3 million over a 5-year period started in 2016. Wedgeworth targeted women on dating apps by posing as a surgeon who was looking for a long-term partner to settle down with. During his years-long crime spree, he did not maintain a primary residence and was essentially a drifter who stayed with his victims. His crimes eventually caught up with him, and in October of 2021, a grand jury indicted him on a slew of federal charges. In May of 2022, Wedgeworth pleaded guilty to 25 counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The judge also ordered Wedgeworth to pay more than $1.1 million in restitution, although it's unclear whether he can afford the debt. Number 13. Sunita Britton. In January of 2022, a 51-year-old mother of 2 from Haworth, England, named Sunita Britton connected with a man named Michael Anderson through Facebook dating. They had a lot in common, or so it seemed, including a shared birthday and being adopted. Britton would later reveal that she met Michael at a vulnerable time in her life. In her own words, she had just left a loveless marriage, was going through a divorce, and was craving attention and to feel wanted. Michael delivered to these desires by telling her things that sounded like they were straight out of a fairy tale. In addition to being charming, he made himself seem wealthy, claiming that he was a cryptocurrency analyst who owned a multi-million-dollar engineering company. But there were red flags which Britton would later admit to overlooking, including Michael's refusal to video chat because he claimed he was shy. And roughly a week after the two matched, Michael told Britton he had to make an emergency trip to Cyprus, where a worker suffered a tragic accident at a project his company was supposedly overseeing. During his alleged travels, he called Britton and claimed he was in police custody. He persuaded her to wire nearly $12,000, which he claimed he needed to pay his lawyer. Britton believed Michael was good for his money and was planning to pick him up from the airport upon his return to the UK, only to receive a phone call from someone claiming to be his lawyer. The caller said that Michael had been arrested for tax evasion and was once again in law enforcement custody. Thanks to a dose of reality from a concerned friend, Britton finally realized she had been scammed. She wisely decided to cut her losses and immediately froze her bank account, but the scammer continued calling and harassing her in hopes of obtaining more money. Having learned her lesson, Britton refocused her energy on warning others not to ignore warning signs of a scam just because they're craving love and affection. Number 12. The Tinder Swindler of Hinge. During an interview with Kennedy News in May of 2024, a 29-year-old British national named Claudia Harris described herself as a Netflix documentary in the making. She was referring to her experience being scammed by what she described as the Tinder Swindler of Hinge, a man known only as James, who she matched with on the app about a year earlier. Harris said that she and James connected almost instantly after a friend convinced her to download the app. Amid her search for companionship, the two seemed to hit it off immediately during their initial phone and text conversation, which lasted into the early morning hours. At the end of the conversation, they agreed that they needed to meet, and Harris impulsively agreed to pay for a 3-day trip to Malaga, Spain, for their first date. Upon arriving at the hotel, she paid more than $1,000 bill, which she said that James had agreed to split the cost of. James arrived the following morning but claimed he couldn't pay his half of the bill because he was having banking issues during their time together. Harris noticed that James had a much different personality than the man she had hit it off with over the phone. Despite clearly being the same person, she described their conversation as minimal, but said that she went out for drinks, got tattoos, and explored the city with James in an attempt to make the most of her time there. While en route to the airport at the end of the trip, Harris noticed that her already standoffish date had grown even more quiet and awkward. After parting ways, her attempts to reach James were met with radio silence. She never received the money James had promised her for the hotel bill, and when she reported his profile to the dating app for suspected fraud, she claimed that no action was taken. The app later confirmed that James had been banned, and while no legal action was taken against him, Harris reflected on the incident as a learning experience. She also swore off the dating app culture and vowed to meet her next partner in a more traditional fashion. Number 11. The pig butchering swindle. In June of 2023, an American mother of 3 named Rebecca Holloway went public with her experience falling victim to a romance scammer. The 42-year-old was targeted in a growing trend among con artists known as a pig butchering swindle, which involves fattening up a victim over time with a phony relationship, then butchering the target with shoddy investment advice. Holloway, who works as a freelance marketing executive, told the Daily Mail that she lost more than $100,000 to a scammer posing as a French entrepreneur living in Philadelphia named Fred. The pair struck up a conversation after matching on Tinder and bonded over being single parents. Fred eventually persuaded Holloway to invest in bogus cryptocurrency schemes by directing her to seemingly real URLs. At first, Holloway saw returns on her investment, and she was able to immediately withdraw her profits, which only solidified her confidence that she was participating in a legitimate cryptocurrency platform. She eventually withdrew her entire 401k and poured it into the investment scheme. In the meantime, Holloway believed her relationship with Fred was growing stronger, even though he refused to meet up in person and avoided fully showing his face during video chats. In hindsight, she admitted that there were obvious signs that something was amiss, but at the time, she was vulnerable and coming out of a messy second marriage. Looking back, she realized that Fred had targeted her at an opportune time. Holloway is just one of many women who have fallen victim to the so-called pig butchering scheme, which appears to be gaining traction in the US, the UK, and Australia. Culprits typically target financially stable, middle-aged women who are craving romance, and the schemes are often operated by entire crime syndicates who work together to siphon victims of their hard-earned savings. Number 10. Rob Harris. Christina LaBarbera of Bergen County, New Jersey, established a successful career as a realtor for Christie's International, enabling her to accumulate a savings of more than $70,000, and she lost it all to an alleged romance swindler named Rob Harris, who advertised himself as a 30-year-old real estate agent on the dating app where the two first connected. 2 weeks after they both swiped right, LaBarbera and Harris went on their first date. At an upscale seafood restaurant in Manhattan, to LaBarbera, it seemed like the chemistry was instant. 4 months later, they were still seeing each other and began discussing the prospect of moving to Miami together. The couple began taking steps to turn this vision into a reality, including by applying for their Florida real estate licenses and shopping for a condo. At around the same time, Harris began asking LaBarbera for thousands of dollars in order to extend an Airbnb rental down in Florida. He initially requested $7,500 and promised to repay to the tune of $10,000. And with no reason not to trust her boyfriend of several months, LaBarbera didn't hesitate to provide the funds. But Harris never repaid the initial loan, and he continuously made excuses for needing more money, including family members suffering from serious medical issues, not having access to his wallet, and needing bail money following his supposed arrest on an outstanding warrant. LaBarbera later told Inside Edition that the repeated requests for cash started to make her nervous, but Harris reassured her of his ability to repay her by sending a screenshot of what appeared to be a $720,000 bank balance. By the time she realized she had been duped, she had nothing left to give. In early 2024, LaBarbera went public with her story, writing in a New York Post exclusive that Harris had love-bombed her. She also filed a civil lawsuit, although she said she doubted that she would ever see the money she had lost. According to the most recent available updates, there was a warrant out for Harris's arrest in Mahwah, New Jersey, for theft and credit card fraud. He appears to still be at large. Number 9. Amon Namara. Nicknamed the South African Tinder Swindler, 43-year-old Amonello Namara was arrested in March of 2022 for conning women he met on the popular dating app. According to news reports, the sales representative scammed one victim out of more than $170,000, resulting in fraud, money laundering, and theft charges against him. According to an affidavit, the victim deposited around $108,000 into Namara's bank account and gave him over $97,000 in cash, which she borrowed from some friends. She believed that the money would be put toward a business venture, and her friends were under the same impression. But Namara allegedly cut off all contact after receiving the money. Not long after that, he reportedly bought a brand new Mercedes-Benz, and he was dressed head to toe in designer duds during his first court appearance following his arrest. The prosecutor opposed the defendant's release on bail, noting that Namara was in the country illegally and had previously tried to fraudulently obtain a visa in his ex-wife's name, making him a flight risk. Despite this, the judge set bail at $28,500. While announcing the decision to set bail, the judge instructed Namara to report to his local police station once a week, banned him from contacting victims and witnesses, and ordered him to surrender his passport. During the hearing, Namara maintained his innocence and announced his plans to call witnesses to testify on his behalf. Updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the current status of the case unclear. At the time of his arrest, he also had a separate pending fraud case as well as an assault charge. Number 8. Dmitry Frolov. Dubbed the Russian Tinder Swindler, 42-year-old Dmitry Frolov evaded law enforcement for over a decade while traveling throughout Russia, conning an estimated 300 women out of hundreds of thousands of dollars along the way. He targeted his victims through Tinder, where his profile headline stated, "Tired of being alone, looking for a family, running my small business." According to Russian news outlets, Frolov gained his victims' trust by playing up the role of the cute and caring, chubby guy. Typically, he would date a victim for a few months before proposing marriage, buying a house together, or a joint business venture with the ulterior motive of getting his hands on the woman's pocketbook. One victim, a 35-year-old beauty salon owner and single mother named Alina Milanaya, accused him of conning her out of her apartment, her car, and a $7,000 loan. She told reporters that Frolov's success is in his self-confidence, stating that he knows what a woman wants and acts qualified to fulfill those desires. Milanaya also described the accused fraudster as being polite and intellectual, and therefore very persuasive, but at the end of her relationship with Frolov, she nearly ended up on the street. She went on to claim that Frolov had even swindled money out of women who had little or none to begin with, and in some cases had taken advantage of his mistress's relatives. Another woman, 50-year-old Alexandra Peskova, told the Russian tabloid newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda that Frolov worked on her for over 2 years. She gave him her car and nearly sold her family home in Moscow in order to pursue a proposed business venture. Frolov reportedly used the ill-gotten funds he swindled out of his victims on renting luxury houses and hiring chauffeurs, whom he never paid, while entertaining other women. He was finally arrested in March of 2023. According to the most recent available updates on the case, he remains in custody and could face up to 6 years in prison if convicted. Number 7. Kieran McNamara. Hailing from Coventry, England, romance swindler Kieran McNamara wore many hats depending on which dating profile each of his victims came across. The 37-year-old claimed to be a lawyer, property developer, company director, and in all cases a millionaire with money to burn. In reality, he had no job and lived out of a suitcase. In addition to targeting women online, he met victims in high-end hotels and clubs. To make his ruse more believable, McNamara went by various aliases, including Kieran Griffin, Christian McNamara, and Miles McNamara, and posted pictures of himself in nice clothing and at upscale places in his dating profiles. He convinced his targets to loan him money by inventing fake crises to justify his alleged need for large sums of cash despite supposedly being rich. McNamara fooled 4 women into giving him more than $390,000, which he used on luxury travel and a lavish lifestyle. He also put some of the ill-gotten money toward reeling in his next victim with expensive gifts and travel so that she would believe he was truly wealthy and was therefore more likely to loan him money when asked. But the serial swindling eventually came to an end after one of the victims caught on to what was happening and reported McNamara to the police. Around the time of his arrest in September of 2023, a raid of one of his storage units yielded a collection of luxury goods valued at over $25,000. McNamara pleaded guilty to 4 counts of fraud by misrepresentation in early 2024 and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. While imposing the punishment, the judge cited the defendant's criminal record, which contains convictions for similar crimes, as an aggravating factor, as well as McNamara's high likelihood of reoffending in the future. At the time of the sentencing hearing, attempts to locate additional assets and funds were ongoing. Number 6. Jackson Liu. In March of 2022, Toronto police announced the arrest of 20-year-old Jackson Liu, amid a theft investigation. According to authorities, he targeted victims on dating apps and in social media groups over a 3-month period beginning in late November of 2021. Prosecutors claimed that Lou eventually visited his targets at their homes, where he asked to use the victim's cell phone, but instead of making a call, he sent himself money using the person's banking and financial apps. He was also accused of using the victim's credit cards to make purchases without their knowledge or permission, including more than $2,000 in Uber transactions. At least 5 people accused Lou of scamming them out of an estimated collective $30,000. He was charged with over 24 crimes, including 1 count of attempted theft under $5,000, 11 counts of theft under $5,000, 13 counts of possession of property obtained by crime, and 15 counts of credit card fraud. Shortly after his arrest, police urged any other victims to come forward. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 5. Emmanuel Scotts. 53-year-old British serial fraudster Emmanuel Scotts targeted victims on a dating website designed for older singles, where he posed as a divorced financial trader who owned a penthouse and a Range Rover. He typically showered the women he met with attention and began intimate relationships with them before asking them for money. One woman named Vicky was conned out of nearly $17,000. She described Scotts as smartly dressed in designer clothing and accessories. He came across as a savvy businessman and convinced her that he was going to help her get her own business off the ground. Vicky later said that she realized Scotts was scamming her when she made a joke about reporting him, and he exploded in response. She had been trying to convince Scotts to repay just a portion of the total amount she had given him when she made the remark. Unaware that it would trigger such an irate reaction, when she Googled Scotts' name, she was shocked to discover that he has a history of scamming, including a past conviction and prison sentence for a fraud scheme he committed with his wife. In his latest batch of crimes, Scotts swindled more than $418,000 from 4 victims, including Vicky and another woman who lost more than $300,000. In late 2022, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Number 4. Samuel Nankivell. In August of 2020, a 25-year-old British man named Samuel Nankivell was accused of using his young son as a weapon in order to pull at a woman's heartstrings and persuade her to give him money. According to prosecutors, Nankivell was living in a guest house in Exeter earlier that year when he met the victim, who he showed an increased interest in after learning that she was due to inherit some money in the near future. He convinced the woman that he needed to secure his own housing in order to see his toddler, and persuaded her to try borrowing nearly $33,000. She was approved for around half that amount, and Nankivell accompanied her to the bank to collect the cash. In reality, authorities claim that Nankivell was motivated by personal gain rather than a desire to spend time with his child. The victim accused him of giving her the cold shoulder as soon as he got his hands on the loan money. That same day, he bought a motorcycle and nearly $1,700 worth of leather riding gear. Nankivell proceeded to have custom work done on the bike while allegedly telling lies in order to avoid paying for it. In the meantime, he convinced one business to loan him a different motorcycle by pretending to be a National Health Service worker who needed the vehicle for their job. When the victim realized she was being scammed and asked Nankivell for her money back, he came up with stories in an apparent attempt to avoid repaying her, including that he was suffering from cancer. This certainly wasn't his first time being accused of fraud or theft. In fact, he already had numerous prior convictions dating back to 2017, including one case where he reportedly tried to avoid paying a hotel bill by claiming that his mother had just passed away. Following his most recent swindle, Nankivell admitted to fraud and was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. Number 3. Peter Gray. In 2023, 35-year-old Peter Gray of West Yorkshire, England, was accused of swindling 4 women out of a collective $105,000 sum. He connected with the victims on Tinder, then proceeded to shower them with gifts while acting like the perfect boyfriend, who was charming, attractive, and a good listener. Instead of coming up with bogus excuses for needing urgent loans like many romance scammers, Gray stealthily stole his victims' identities. One woman later told BBC Radio Live that Gray went into her wallet and snapped photos of her driver's license and bank cards while she used his bathroom. She had left her purse on his dining room table, not thinking twice about how her seemingly harmless date could be a thief in disguise. The woman later discovered that Gray had taken out more than $11,000 in loans in her name. Gray offered to repay her, but she went to the police instead. Another victim said that Gray seemed calm and reassuring, but that something about him didn't sit right. Her instincts proved correct just days later when she received a letter stating that she had been approved for a $26,000 loan. She called off the relationship but ended up giving Gray a second chance and became pregnant with his child. The woman ended things for good after discovering that she was expecting because she didn't want to raise her child around a scammer. Gray was ultimately convicted of his crimes, and in May of 2024 he was sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison. Today's topic was requested by Corey Walker 88 and Vintage Billy UK 9005. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Evelyn Henao Herrera. Like many tourists, 27-year-old Paul Nguyen was attracted to Medellin, Colombia's thriving nightlife scene. In November 2022, he traveled there with a friend with plans to attend a concert, sightsee, and hit the clubs. Nguyen also made time to meet with a strikingly gorgeous woman he had connected with on Tinder. He was so awestruck by her beauty that he surreptitiously snapped a photo of her at the bar where they met and shared it with his friends, along with a note about how the language barrier is unreal. This was the last time anyone heard from Nguyen. When he failed to return to his Airbnb, his travel companion contacted his relatives and began searching for him. In the hours after he vanished, his credit card was used to withdraw money from an ATM several miles from his last known whereabouts, and $500 had been sent from his PayPal account to a name nobody recognized. His credit card had also been used at a store by someone who did not look like him. Nguyen's lifeless body was eventually found next to a dumpster near the ATM where his credit card was used. He had died from cardiac arrest after being drugged with a sedative and robbed. It's unfortunately not uncommon for gangs to target tourists in this fashion. In April of 2023, authorities announced the arrest of 3 suspects. The mysterious Tinder date, Evelyn Henao Herrera, and 28-year-old Cesar Augusto Mendoza Lopez are facing charges of aggravated homicide, aggravated robbery, and conspiracy to commit a crime for the purpose of robbery. 25-year-old Brian Taborda Herrera is accused of participating in the robbery but is not facing a murder charge. The case appears to be ongoing. After watching this video, did you think romances could get any worse? Think again, because we've got our previous release of When Being Fuck Buddies Goes Wrong coming up right after number 1. Stay tuned. Number 1. Brandon Kime. In 2016, 35-year-old Brandon Kime was accused of scamming 3 Tinder dates and his former employer out of nearly $50,000. According to New York City prosecutors, he posed as a financial industry professional and persuaded the victims to fork over the cash by claiming that he needed to pay 2 of his family members' cancer bills and that his wallet had been stolen. Kime promised to repay the money as soon as he regained access to his funds, but he never made good on his word. He wrote one victim a check for $5,000 from an account that had been closed, and it bounced. To make the situation even more disturbing, one of the women was a cancer survivor herself, and her own experience was one of the factors that compelled her to help when Kime asked her for a loan. Kime also committed some of his crimes while out on bail for previous arrests related to his scamming. In addition to the romance scams, Kime was accused of swindling a 5-figure sum from a man he had previously worked for as a dog walker. According to authorities, he set up a Venmo account using his employer's debit card information and made $13,000 worth of transactions. In 2017, Kime pleaded guilty to grand larceny, identity theft, and scheme to defraud. He was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison. 22-year-old Jaden Napolitano went to her ex-boyfriend's house on Serene Run in Lake Worth Beach, Florida, on the night of July the 20th of 2022. The couple had split up approximately 4 months prior, but they'd been seeing each other and hooking up even after the breakup. According to a police report, Napolitano attacked her ex on the night in question. She allegedly began slapping him in the head, then started punching him after he tried to block the strikes. The man, who was left unnamed in subsequent reports, attempted to subdue his violent ex-girlfriend by wrapping her in a beer hug. He managed to pin her to the ground, but when he let her stand up, she reportedly grabbed a piece of wood and threw it at him, hitting his arm. Napolitano then proceeded to hurl several objects at the man's pickup truck, causing the windshield to crack. At some point, the man's new girlfriend arrived at the scene, further inflaming the dispute with Napolitano. The 2 women argued with one another before the situation escalated to physical violence. Napolitano allegedly lunged at the other woman and struck her in the face. In the incident's aftermath, Napolitano from Delray Beach was arrested and charged with domestic battery, criminal mischief, and aggravated battery. After being booked at the Palm Beach County Jail, the young woman was released on her own recognizance. Number 5. James Hatchem. On July the 28th of 2023, a woman contacted Australian law enforcement to inform them that she found partial human remains in a grassy area near the Hume Highway on the southern outskirts of Goulburn, southwest of Sydney. Authorities subsequently searched the surrounding areas extensively, leading to the discovery of more remains. Through forensic analysis, investigators were able to identify the body parts as belonging to 30-year-old Samar Baker. The latter was a vocational education and training worker from Greater Western Sydney. Back in January of 2019, she was murdered near her Parramatta apartment by her ex-boyfriend, James Hatchem. The 35-year-old from Hertzville Grove was described as Baker's occasional lover. The pair had an on-again, off-again relationship for over 3 years, continuing to share intimate encounters outside the confines of a full-fledged dating relationship. About a month before Baker initially went missing, she ended her involvement with Hatchem altogether after meeting another man. Hatchem was reportedly incensed by the development. He formulated a fake story about his parents getting into a car accident in order to lure Baker out of her apartment, whereupon he killed her. Following the murder, Hatchem went to a hardware store to purchase a sheet, gloves, cleaning products, and a digging trowel. He subsequently drove to a number of isolated rural areas to dispose of the body. In 2022, Hatchem was found guilty of Baker's murder. Despite her remains not having been found by that point, he was sentenced to a minimum of 18 years behind bars for the crime. Number 4. Kiera Levitt. British woman Kiera Levitt was left alone at the home of a friend with benefits on December the 19th of 2020. Before leaving to buy some more alcohol, the man had ordered a pizza to arrive at the Sunderland home. While he was gone, Levitt became convinced that he was seeing another woman and sent him messages that read, "Watch your house go up in flames and you won't have no home left." 30-year-old Levitt then set fire to the man's shoes on the porch before taking a taxi home. Prior to the emergency services making their way to the scene, the pizza delivery driver had arrived at the address and saw what he believes was the silhouette of a woman inside the smoking apartment. The unnamed man went into the residence and tried to put out the fire, which was initially restricted to the hallway. However, by the time he'd searched the home and found no one inside, the fire had extended considerably. The delivery driver thus ran out and called the emergency services. The blaze would ultimately require 3 fire engines to put out. The home of Levitt's friend was left uninhabitable due to extensive water, smoke, and fire damage. The cost of repairs was reported as being in the 4 figures. A shop below the apartment had also been affected and had to be closed down for a few days. When Levitt was arrested the following morning, she reportedly became belligerent, screaming that no one was going to make a mug of her. The woman admitted arson, being reckless to whether life would be endangered, but avoided jail time. In August of 2021, she was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, suspended for 2 years, with rehabilitation, alcohol treatment, and curfew requirements. Number 3. Cedric Brown. In the early hours of April the 11th of 2022, Florida man Cedric Brown went to the West Palm Beach home belonging to a woman described as his friends with benefits. She'd reportedly been calling his phone repeatedly that night. According to what the unnamed woman told police, she was imploring him to give her money he owed relating to her income tax refund. Fed up with her insistent attempts to reach him, Brown barged into the house and confronted her in her bedroom, where she was sitting with her brother and a friend. Brown tossed the house key she'd given him at her, then demanded that she stop calling him. The woman later told police that Brown reached into his pants, pulled out a green handgun, and cocked the gun back to place a round in the chamber. He then pointed it directly at her and stated, "I'll kill all y'all." Brown eventually put the weapon away, approached the woman, and snatched her cell phone. The 31-year-old man took the phone into the kitchen and started smashing it on the ground, trying to break it. Brown's friend with benefits reportedly saw several shards of broken glass on the kitchen floor, which came from the sliding pantry door that shattered when a piece of the phone ricocheted upwards. Brown left out the back door and the woman followed. However, at some point he pulled out the green handgun and struck her in the back of the head with it. The man then got in his car and left the scene. The altercation that unfolded outside the house was captured by a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera. A warrant was issued for Brown's arrest and police units were sent to his last known address. A brief pursuit ensued, but he was eventually apprehended. He was charged with armed burglary of a dwelling, robbery with a firearm, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, 2 counts of aggravated assault with intent to commit a felony, resisting an officer without violence, and tampering with a witness or victim. as per the most recent updates, Brown had been released on bail. Number 2. Theodore Pafundi. Las Vegas man Theodore Pafundi was in a relationship with Tiffany Swindlers for 12 years, during the course of which they had 3 children. In 2022, the pair split up for a couple of months before getting back together. Meanwhile, Swindlers also grew close with a man by the name of Chad Jensen, although they maintained a friends-only relationship for about 4 years with Pafundi in the picture. Eventually, their bond became more intimate in nature. Swindlers would go on to describe their relationship as being akin to friends with benefits. On January the 6th of 2023, 38-year-old Pafundi and Swindlers went to a local cafe before returning to the trailer park near Washington Avenue and Lamb Boulevard, where they'd been staying with Swindlers' aunt. As they were entering the code to unlock the gates at the front of the complex, Jensen reportedly pulled up next to them. The man exited his vehicle, hurling obscenities at both Swindlers and Pafundi, whom he also punched in the mouth. Subsequently, Pafundi pulled out a gun and fired 5 shots, hitting his love rival, who then got back in his car and drove into some landscaping. Swindlers and Pafundi went to her aunt's trailer, where the latter got into another car and attempted to flee the complex. However, as he pulled up to the front gate, his path was blocked by police cruisers. The man eventually surrendered to law enforcement. While speaking with officers, Pafundi indicated that he and Jensen had engaged in multiple verbal spats in the weeks leading up to the shooting. He claimed to have snapped when Jensen confronted them, stating, "Maybe deep down I wanted to shoot this guy." Jensen, who was unarmed at the time, ultimately succumbed to his gunshot wounds. Pafundi consequently faced the charge of open murder in connection with the incident. Number 1. Scott Andrew Hundley. 44-year-old Scott Andrew Hundley from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, faced serious criminal charges for a relationship he formed with a teenage girl. The man was accused of creating a friends with benefits situation with the unnamed minor, who was the daughter of one of Hundley's colleagues. In court, the victim's mother said that he took advantage of her daughter, adding, "Her life is forever impacted." The woman also stated her belief that going to jail wouldn't do anything to change Hundley as a person. At some point during the proceedings, the Franklin County Assistant District Attorney read aloud a letter written to Hundley by the victim herself. She wrote that she hated him and that he didn't deserve the tears he'd caused her to shed. She also reflected on their initial meeting, when Hundley allegedly told her that she looked like she was in her 20s. Her father corrected the man and told him she was still just a teen. Nevertheless, Hundley refused to back off. The girl continued writing, "I saw you as my best friend and counselor. I feel embarrassed, betrayed." In the end, Hundley was convicted of indecent assault and corruption of minors at a jury trial in May of 2016. He wasn't, however, found guilty of the more severe charge of aggravated indecent assault. The presiding judge sentenced him to up to 23 months in county jail, after which he would be on probation for a period of 5 years. Hundley was also ordered to pay fines and restitution, as well as to register as a Megan's Law offender for 40 years. Thanks for watching. Would you rather expose a Tinder swindler publicly or remain silent and not let your loved ones find out you fell for it? Let us know in the comments section below.